7 o'clock at night in San Francisco. The Fairmont Hotel gleamed like a golden palace, hosting California's most exclusive charity event. Cars that cost more than houses unloaded billionaires in designer tuxedos, while camera flashes captured performative smiles for society magazines. Steph Curry stepped out of his Tesla, adjusting the $50,000 Tom Ford tuxedo that his stylist had chosen specifically for the occasion. The tech giant's gala promised to raise $15 million for diverse humanitarian causes, a phrase vague enough that nobody needed to know exactly where the money would end up. To understand how a simple 30-second gesture forever changed the perspective of billionaires, we need to go back to the moment when humanity found the protocol and decided that protocols sometimes need to be broken. Have you ever felt that strange sensation when something isn't right, but you can't identify exactly what? Curry walked through the main entrance, greeting CEOs and magnates from Silicon Valley, when an uneasiness began to grow in his chest. Something about all that opulence bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. Kevin O'Connor, the event organizer and heir to a technology fortune, received Curry with a calculated smile. "Steph, what an honor to have you here. Our little party will raise more money tonight than some countries move in a year." Little party of 1,000 guests, where each plate cost $500 and champagne was served in crystal glasses worth more than a monthly minimum wage. You could feel the atmosphere charged with artificial elegance, where each gesture seemed choreographed to impress. "Humanity has no protocol," Curry murmured to himself, a phrase that had spontaneously sprouted from somewhere deep in his consciousness. He himself didn't know where these words came from, but they echoed in his mind like a restless mantra. Curry followed O'Connor through the main hall, observing tables decorated with orchids imported from Japan and arrangements that cost more than many people earned in a month. The guests chatted animatedly about investments, acquisitions, and occasionally mentioned the noble causes they were there for, always in passing, like someone mentioning the weather. How is it possible that people capable of moving financial mountains talk about humanity like someone discussing stock options? Curry observed the conversations around him and felt a growing disconnection with that environment that should have seemed familiar. "Steph," Diana Thompson approached, diamonds on her neck that shone like captured stars. "You need to meet my newest acquisition, a Picasso I just bought for $80 million. It's for my art foundation, of course. Fantastic tax deduction." It was impossible not to notice the irony. $80 million on a canvas, justified as charity, while outside the hotel, at the service entrance in the back, a small figure moved among the shadows. Curry excused himself from Diana and walked toward the enormous windows that faced the service patio. What he saw made him stop instantly, as if he had taken a punch to the stomach. A boy, no more than 8 years old, was rummaging through a garbage container. His clothes were a mosaic of patches and dirt, his feet bare even in the cold California night. But it wasn't the poverty that shocked Curry. It was the desperate methodology with which the child searched for food among the scraps. "My God," Curry whispered, his voice coming out choked. Ryan Johnson, CEO of one of the world's largest technology companies, followed Curry's gaze. "Ah, that. It's a constant problem here downtown. The city hall should do something about these beggars. They disturb the movement of establishments." The coldness in Johnson's voice hit Curry like a slap. "Beggars? It's a child." "It's a social problem," Johnson shrugged, returning to his conversation about cryptocurrencies. Curry remained, glued to the window, watching the boy continue his desperate search. The child found half a sandwich in a crumpled package and devoured it with a hunger that made Curry's stomach contract with empathetic pain. What's most impressive is how we can be physically close to someone and still be in completely different universes. There, separated only by a glass wall, two worlds coexisted. One where people spent $1,000 on dinner, another where a child celebrated finding half a sandwich in the garbage. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when Steph Curry made a decision that would change not only his night, but the perspective of hundreds of people about what it really means to be rich. Curry felt something stirring inside him, an uneasiness that grew like a storm. He looked at the Golden Hall, then at the boy outside, and for the first time in his adult life, questioned whether being on the right side of the glass wall really made him a better person. "Excuse me," he said, to nobody in particular, beginning to walk toward the service door. "Steph, where are you going?" Kevin O'Connor caught up with him. "Dinner is about to start. You're at the main table." "I need fresh air," Curry lied. "Use the VIP balcony. The service entrance is, well, it's not appropriate for guests." Protocol. Always protocol. Curry looked at O'Connor, then at the boy still visible through the glass, and felt something break inside his chest. "Humanity has no protocol," he said aloud this time, the words coming out with a conviction that surprised even him. "What?" Curry didn't respond. He pushed the service door and went out to the cold night patio, leaving behind the artificial warmth of the Golden Hall. The boy looked up when he heard footsteps approaching. They were extraordinary eyes, bright blue that contrasted dramatically with his dark skin, creating a natural beauty that caught attention even amid the street dirt. His black curly hair was disheveled, but couldn't hide the natural dignity that emanated from his face. These blue eyes carried a devastating maturity for someone so young. There was no fear in them, only a resignation that broke Curry's heart into pieces. "Hi," Curry said softly, crouching down to the child's height. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, clearly not accustomed to kindness. "Jamie." "Jamie. That's a beautiful name." "I'm Steph." "I know who you are," Jamie said, cleaning his dirty hands on what remained of his shirt. "You play basketball?" Curry smiled, feeling tears forming in his eyes. "That's right. And you? Are you hungry, Jamie?" The question hung in the air like a bridge between two worlds. Inside, $500 per plate. Outside, a child who hadn't eaten in 2 days. How many times do we ignore the obvious because confronting it means leaving our comfort zone? Curry was about to do exactly the opposite of that. "Can you come with me?" He extended his hand to Jamie. The boy looked at Curry's clean hand, then at his own dirty hands, hesitating. "Don't worry about that," Curry said, taking Jamie's small, dirty hand with the same naturalness he would greet a CEO. "Let's eat something." Curry stood up, still holding Jamie's hand, and walked toward the service door. He knew that what he was about to do would break all the protocols of California's most exclusive event. But at that moment, while feeling Jamie's small, trusting hand in his, Curry realized something that would change his perspective forever. Protocols exist to keep things in place. But sometimes, things need to get out of place to find their true place. The door opened, and Steph Curry entered San Francisco's most exclusive Golden Hall, holding the hand of a street child. What happened next? Nobody would ever forget. But what happened next would change everything forever. The Fairmont Hotel's Golden Hall fell into absolute silence. 1,000 guests, accustomed to high society's strictest protocols, watched incredulously as Steph Curry walked among the crystal tables holding the hand of a street child. Jamie squeezed Curry's hand when he felt all eyes fixed on him. His blue eyes contrasted impressively with his dark skin, creating a natural beauty that made it even more impactful to see him in a vulnerable situation. His black curly hair, even disheveled by street life, framed a face that radiated natural dignity. You could perceive the palpable discomfort in the air, not the discomfort of seeing a hungry child, but the discomfort of having their privilege bubble invaded by a reality they preferred to ignore. "Steph," Kevin O'Connor whispered urgently, running after them. "What are you doing? This goes against all the event's protocols." Curry stopped in the middle of the hall, Jamie still at his side, and looked directly into O'Connor's eyes. "Humanity has no protocol," he said, with a firmness that made his voice echo through the silent hall. "And if protocols are preventing humanity, then maybe it's the protocols that are wrong. Have you ever witnessed the exact moment when someone chooses to do what's right instead of what's expected?" The guests were seeing exactly that, and most didn't know how to react. Diana Thompson approached, trying to maintain a diplomatic smile. "Steph, dear, we understand your compassion, but surely there are more appropriate ways to help. We can make a donation to some institution." "With all respect, Diana," Curry responded, crouching down to Jamie's height again. "Jamie doesn't need an institution now. He needs a plate of food. And there are $15 million worth of food in this hall today. How is it possible that people who move billions daily can't process the simple concept of sharing a plate with a hungry child?" Curry was seeing exactly this moral disconnection manifesting in real time. Jamie looked at Curry, then at the hundreds of embarrassed faces around. "Mr. Steph," he whispered, "maybe I should leave. These people don't want me here." The innocence in Jamie's voice cut through the hall like a blade. It was impossible not to feel that an 8-year-old child was demonstrating more dignity than millionaire adults. "Jamie," Curry said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you have as much right to be here as any person in this hall. In fact, you have more right, because you really need what we're offering." Ryan Johnson approached, clearly irritated. "Curry, this is a private party. There are protocols, security, legal liability issues. You can't simply bring someone from the street." "Someone from the street?" Curry stood up slowly, controlled indignation growing in his voice. "This someone has a name. It's Jamie. And while you were debating which champagne goes best with caviar, Jamie was eating half a sandwich he found in the garbage." The silence that followed was deafening. Some guests lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others seemed genuinely shocked, as if they had never considered that real. Poverty existed beyond their tax-deductible donations. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when Steph Curry decided to transform embarrassment into education. "You know what impresses me?" Curry continued, his voice carrying an intensity that held everyone's attention. "You're going to donate $15 million tonight for humanitarian causes. But when the humanitarian cause appears in the form of a real child, with a real name, with real hunger, suddenly there are protocols." Samantha Davis, a Forbes journalist covering the event, had discreetly started recording on her phone. She realized she was witnessing something historic. Not just a charity event, but a moral lesson in real time. "Humanity has no protocol," Curry repeated, but this time directed the words directly at Jamie. "Jamie, would you like to have dinner with us?" Jamie's eyes filled with tears. not of sadness, but of a gratitude too deep for his age. His bright blue eyes, so unique in contrast with his dark skin and curly hair, reflected a pure emotion that touched every heart present. Can I really? Of course you can. And you know why? Because when someone is hungry and you have food, there's no protocol in the world that should prevent you from sharing. What's most impressive is how a child can become the moral teacher of a room full of supposedly educated adults. Jamie was about to teach lessons that no MBA could offer. Curry guided Jamie to the main table, where his place was reserved between two CEOs of billion-dollar companies. The irony didn't go unnoticed by anyone. The poorest person in the hall, seated at the most exclusive table of the night. "Everyone," Curry announced to the table, "this is my friend Jamie. Jamie, these are some business people. They'll love meeting you." The embarrassment was palpable. The executives didn't know how to react, how to greet a street child, how to converse with someone who didn't understand stocks, investments, or acquisitions. Jamie solved the problem for them. "Thank you for letting me sit here," he said, with a natural politeness that shamed the artificiality of the adults around. "You are very kind." Jamie's genuine innocence contrasted brutally with the forced smiles and performative kindness that dominated the environment. It was as if a real light had entered a room full of artificial lights. The waiter approached, clearly confused about how to proceed. Kevin O'Connor signaled for him to ignore Jamie, but Curry intercepted. "Jamie, what would you like to eat?" Jamie looked at the $500 menu as if it were written in hieroglyphics. I don't know how to read very well yet," he admitted, embarrassed. An uncomfortable silence settled at the table. Here was a child who couldn't read a menu, surrounded by people who bought companies before breakfast. "Don't worry," Curry said softly. "How about I choose something tasty for you? Do you like chicken?" "I like anything," Jamie responded, with an honesty that broke hearts around the table. Diana Thompson, seated across from Jamie, finally broke her own protocol. "Jamie, dear," she said, with a genuine softness that surprised even herself, "how long has it been since you had a real meal?" Jamie thought for a moment, counting on his dirty fingers. 2 days, maybe 3. Sometimes I lose count." The answer hit the table like lightning. 2 women began crying discreetly. One of Silicon Valley's toughest CEOs cleared his throat several times, trying to control his emotion. How many times do we need a child to remind us what really matters in life? Jamie was doing exactly that, without even realizing it. The first course arrived, a filet mignon with truffle potatoes that cost more than many families spent on food during a month. Jamie looked at the plate as if it were a treasure. "Can I really eat all of this?" he asked, looking around the table. "Of course, Jamie," Curry smiled. "It's all yours." Jamie picked up the knife and fork with exaggerated care, clearly not accustomed to elegant utensils. Each bite was savored as if it were the last meal of his life. The silence at the table was profound, but not uncomfortable. It was reverent. Everyone was watching something they had never seen. Genuine gratitude for something they considered mundane. "Is it good?" Diana asked. Jamie stopped chewing and looked at her with bright eyes. "It's the best food I've ever eaten in my whole life. Thank you." It was impossible not to notice that Jamie was teaching a lesson that none of the adults at the table had learned in decades of success. That true gratitude doesn't come from having everything, but from valuing what you receive. Ryan Johnson, who had been most resistant to Jamie's presence, leaned forward. "Jamie, where do you live?" "Nowhere," Jamie responded simply. I sleep wherever I can. Sometimes under the bridge, sometimes in the park. And your parents? I don't have any. The aunt who took care of me left. About 6 months ago. She said she didn't have money to support me. Each word was a devastating revelation about a reality that existed a few blocks from that golden hall. But that could be on another planet for the awareness the guests had of it. Humanity has no protocol, Curry said a third time, but now the words carried a prophetic weight. He knew that something fundamental was changing at that table, in that hall, in those people. Jamie finished his plate and looked around as if he were storing every detail in memory. Thank you for treating me like normal people, he said, with a simplicity that hit every heart present. Like normal people. The four words echoed at the table like a final judgment on how society treats its most vulnerable. Nobody could imagine that this moment would be the turning point. The moment had come for the event's official speeches. Kevin O'Connor went up on stage with his carefully prepared script about strategic philanthropy and sustainable social impact. But his words sounded hollow after what everyone had witnessed in the last hour. Steph Curry wasn't scheduled to speak, but when O'Connor finished his technical speech about donation efficiency, something inside Curry moved irresistibly. He stood up from the main table, Jamie still at his side finishing a dessert that cost more than many people earned per week. Excuse me, Curry said, walking toward the stage. May I say a few words? The entire hall turned to him. You could feel the electric tension in the air, as if everyone knew they were about to witness something that would change their perspectives forever. Curry went up on stage without a script, without preparation, only with Jamie's image engraved in his heart. He looked at the 1,000 guests, CEOs, magnates, heiresses, influencers, and for a moment felt the weight of responsibility to speak truths nobody wanted to hear. Good evening, he began, his voice echoing through the silent hall. I wasn't supposed to speak today, but sometimes life puts us in moments where staying quiet would be a betrayal of our own values. Have you ever witnessed someone completely abandon their comfort zone to speak an inconvenient truth? Curry was about to do exactly that, in front of California's most powerful people. You saw that I brought a special guest today. Jamie, 8 years old. Some of you were uncomfortable. Some questioned the protocols. Some wondered if it was appropriate. Curry paused, letting the silence weigh on the audience. And I understand that discomfort. You know why? Because it's easier to donate 15 million to an abstract cause than to share a plate of food with a real person, with a real name, with a real story. The words cut through the air like razors. It was impossible not to notice faces contracting, consciences being confronted with uncomfortable truths. Jamie hadn't eaten in 3 days. 3 days. At this exact moment, while you decided how much to donate to look generous in society magazines, a child 50 meters from here was looking for food in the garbage. How is it possible for someone to transform a social event into such a clear moral mirror? Curry was doing exactly that, and each word hit the target with surgical precision. But you know what impresses me most? Curry continued, his voice gaining intensity. It's not that Jamie was hungry. It's that when I brought him here, some of you were more worried about protocols than about the fact that a child was starving outside. Diana Thompson, in the front row, was wiping tears discreetly. Ryan Johnson stared fixedly at his hands, unable to maintain eye contact with the stage. The discomfort in the hall was palpable, but it was productive discomfort, the kind that's born when we confront our own hypocrisies. Humanity has no protocol, Curry said, his key phrase now loaded with its most powerful meaning. And if our protocols are preventing us from being human, then it's not the protocols that need to change. It's us. Naturally, this leads us to the most impactful moment of the speech, when Curry decided to reveal something personal that would change how everyone saw wealth and responsibility. I want to tell you a story I've never told publicly, Curry continued, his voice becoming softer, more intimate. When I was Jamie's age, my family went through severe financial difficulties. There were nights my parents didn't know where the next meal would come from. An absolute silence took over the hall. Even the waiters stopped moving. I remember one specific night. I was hungry, and my mother didn't have money to buy food. A neighbor, a man who barely knew us, knocked on our door and brought groceries. Not because he was trying to impress someone, not because he would get a tax deduction, simply because he saw that we needed it. What's most impressive is how a personal story can illuminate universal truths about compassion and social responsibility. Curry was using his own vulnerability to teach a lesson that no MBA could offer. That man saved me, Curry continued, tears beginning to form in his eyes, not just from that night's hunger, but taught me something I carry to this day, that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you do when you see someone in need. Curry looked directly at Jamie, still seated at the main table. Jamie reminded me of that child I was, reminded me that behind each statistic about child poverty exists a Jamie, with a name, with dreams, with dignity. The emotion in Curry's voice was infecting the entire hall. People who hadn't cried in years felt tears rolling down their faces. So tonight, while you decide how much to donate to your causes, I want you to ask yourselves, when was the last time you really saw poverty? Not read about it, not signed a check for it, but really saw it in the eyes? How many times are we forced to confront the difference between performative charity and genuine compassion? Curry was creating exactly that moment of confrontation for every person present. Jamie ate today, Curry continued, but tomorrow he'll return to the streets. And at the next charity event, you'll donate millions to combat child hunger, while children like Jamie continue invisible on the other side of your glass walls. The silence was deafening. Curry had exposed the fundamental hypocrisy of a society that prefers to donate to abstract causes rather than face real and tangible problems. Humanity has no protocol, he repeated for the fourth time. But humanity has consequences. And the consequence of ignoring our humanity is that we become less human each day. Curry paused, looking around the hall, seeing faces transformed by confrontation with their own consciences. I'm not here to shame you, he said, with a softness that contrasted with the previous intensity. I'm here to remind you of what we all know deep down, that there's no distance between us and those who need our help. The difference between me and Jamie isn't merit. It's luck, circumstance, opportunity. It was impossible not to feel that each word was redesigning how people in the audience saw social responsibility and personal privilege. Jamie! Curry called, signaling for the child to approach the stage. Jamie walked timidly to the stage, still holding the dessert napkin. Curry helped him up and put his hand on his shoulder. Jamie, do you want to say something to these people who were so kind to you today? Jamie looked at the sea of faces, then at Curry, and finally found courage to speak into the microphone. Thank you, he said with a small but clear voice. Thank you for letting me eat with you. Thank you for not pretending that I don't exist. Jamie's words echoed through the hall like a final judgment. Thank you for not pretending that I don't exist. You could perceive that these 10 words from an 8-year-old child had made more impact than 15 corporate speeches about social responsibility. The silence that followed wasn't embarrassing. It was transformative. It was the silence of 1,000 people being forced to rethink everything they believed about wealth, poverty, and what it really means to make a difference. Diana Thompson was the first to stand and applaud. Then Ryan Johnson. In seconds, the entire hall was standing, but it wasn't a protocol applause. It was a deep recognition that they had witnessed something that would change their lives forever. Jamie looked at Curry, confused by all the commotion. Did I do something wrong, Mr. Steph? No, Jamie. Curry smiled through tears. You did everything right. You taught us all how to be truly human. And it was then that the truth finally came to light. What happened in the 30 minutes following Steph Curry's speech would forever change how California's richest saw their social responsibility. They weren't grand proclamations or empty promises. They were immediate, tangible, human actions. Diana Thompson was the first to approach the stage. Without fanfare, without cameras, she looked directly into Jamie's eyes and said, "Jamie, would you like to have a family?" The question hung in the air like a promise of new life. Jamie looked at Curry, then at Diana, processing words that seemed too impossible to be true. "A real family?" he asked, with a voice so small it broke hearts within a 20-meter radius. "A real family," Diana confirmed, tears flowing freely down her face. "If you want, of course." Have you ever witnessed the exact moment when a life completely changes direction? Jamie was living exactly that, and everyone in the hall knew they were witnessing a modern miracle. "Can I really?" Jamie looked at Curry for confirmation. "Jamie," Curry knelt beside the child, "Diana is one of the kindest people I know. She has a big house, with a room that could be just yours, and more importantly, she has a heart big enough to love you as you deserve." It was impossible not to feel the transformative magic that filled the environment. What had started as a performative charity event was becoming a real demonstration of how compassion can change lives in real time. Ryan Johnson, who an hour earlier had referred to Jamie as a social problem, approached with genuine humility that surprised even himself. "Curry, you were right. About protocols, about humanity, about everything. I want to help create something permanent, something that goes beyond annual donations. How is it possible for a man to completely change his perspective in a single night?" Johnson was proving that genuine transformation can happen when we confront our own moral limitations. "What do you have in mind?" Curry asked. "A direct program. No bureaucracy, no intermediaries. People like Jamie connected directly with people like us. Not charity from a distance. Face-to-face humanity." Naturally, this leads us to the moment when Johnson's idea transformed into a movement that would change San Francisco forever. Kevin O'Connor, who had spent the entire night worried about broken protocols, went up on stage with renewed determination. "Everyone, forget the $15 million we plan to raise today. I want to propose something different." The hall fell into absolute silence, waiting. "I want each person in this hall to adopt not a cause, but a person. A child like Jamie. A family in difficulties. Someone real, with a name, with a story. And I want you to do this, not once a year, but as a life commitment." What's most impressive is how a change in perspective can completely transform the purpose of an entire community. O'Connor was proposing nothing less than a revolution in how American elite faces social responsibility. Samantha Davis, who had documented the entire transformation, approached Curry. "Steph, can I publish this story? The world needs to see what happened here today." "Only if Jamie agrees," Curry responded. "The story is his, not mine." Jamie, now holding Diana's hand as if she were the anchor in a storm, looked at Samantha. "If my story can help other children like me, then you can tell it." The emotional maturity of an 8-year-old child continued teaching lessons to adults who considered themselves the most sophisticated in the country. 3 months later, the Jamie program, as it became known, had connected 200 children at risk with San Francisco elite families. Not necessarily formal adoptions, but real, lasting, transformative relationships. Diana Thompson had officially adopted Jamie, who now attended one of California's best private schools. But more important than formal education were the lessons of humanity he continued teaching everyone around him. Ryan Johnson had created an app that connected people in need directly with people willing to help. "No intermediaries, no bureaucracy," he always explained. "Direct humanity." You could perceive that Jamie had become much more than a saved child. He had become the symbol of a new way of thinking about wealth and responsibility. 1 year after the Fairmont Hotel event, Steph Curry and Jamie returned to the same hall. But this time, Jamie wasn't asking for food at the back door. He was as guest of honor at the first annual Humanity Dinner, an event where each child previously at risk dined alongside the family that had welcomed them. Jamie, now 9 years old, wearing a small suit that Diana had specially made for him, went up on stage with a confidence that contrasted dramatically with the previous year's shyness. "Last year," he began, his clear voice echoing through the same hall where he had eaten his first meal in 3 days, "I was hungry outside. Today, I'm here not because someone felt sorry for me, but because someone saw me as a person who deserved love." How many times do we witness a child articulate concepts about human dignity better than social science experts? Jamie was doing exactly that, and each word carried the weight of lived experience. "Mr. Steph taught me that humanity has no protocol. My new family taught me that love has no limit. And all of you taught me that sometimes people just need a chance to show who they really are." The tears running through the hall weren't of pity, but of genuine pride. Pride of having participated in something that changed not only a child's life, but the soul of an entire community. Diana Thompson, seated in the front row, whispered to her husband, "He saved us more than we saved him." And she was right. Jamie had saved a room full of people from their own privilege bubbles, from their own disconnections with reality, from their own moral limitations. Steph Curry, watching Jamie speak with the same passion he himself put into basketball, felt a deep satisfaction that no sports victory had provided. He had done something that transcended records and trophies. He had used his platform to create real change in the lives of real people. "Humanity has no protocol," Jamie concluded his speech, using the words that Curry had made famous on that transformative night. "But humanity has results. And the result is that today, 200 children like me have families that love them. Not out of obligation, but by choice." The applause that followed wasn't protocol. It was celebratory. It was the recognition of a community that had rediscovered its own humanity through a child's eyes. 2 years later, Samantha Davis published a book about the transformation, when protocols meet humanity, how one child taught billionaires to be human. The book became a national bestseller, inspiring similar movements in dozens of American cities. But for Steph Curry, the real success wasn't in the book's sales or the program's replication. It was in a photo on his desk. Jamie, now 10 years old, playing basketball in Diana's backyard, smiling with the carefree joy of a child who knew he was loved. "Humanity has no protocol," Curry would whisper whenever he looked at the photo. But humanity has power, the power to transform a life with a simple gesture. Steph Curry had seen a child asking for food and broken protocol. His attitude had taught the event's rich that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you do when nobody is watching. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important lesson money can buy. That money can't buy humanity, but can be used to express it. Jamie had found a family. A community had found its soul. And Steph Curry had proven that sometimes the greatest victories happen far from the courts. They happen when we decide that protocols should never be more important than people.